Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And more cards for this year's Valentine card series that are also not Valentine. I also want to amend my previous video where I was like, I'm so tired of pink and red. I'm probably still going to do some pink and red cards because I haven't done any yet. I like to mix it up. What can I say? But anyway, I'm including these ones. They aren't really Valentine at all. They can be any occasion. But I also just thought, oh, they're pretty. We'll include them in the series. Why not? Also, I'm going to do a mini release and review. This is not the entire release. Waffle Flower's January release went live today. And there was a lot of products. I am just going to show and walk through the new Postage Collage die and stencil sets because that's what I've got. And I'm super excited about them. But I will post a link in the description box below to the entire release because there's a whole bunch of other like normal wafer dies, you know, like layering dies, you know, rectangles, etc., etc. And then there's also like other, like there's scene building things and there's a lot of really cool things. So I'll just have a link to the release and you guys can check it out. But let's switch the camera over. And then do my wonderful magical, there we go, more Postage Collage. So I will have a visual supply list like specifically to this sort of collection in the description box below as well. And it'll be on my blog too with little picture links to make it easier. So for those not aware, this was the first set that came out back in the middle of last year. This was the Postage Collage die set. This is A2 size, so just slightly smaller than an A2 card front, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So the main die, and then there was a bunch of little accessory wafer dies. I've used this one many times. I've done many videos using it. I absolutely love it. So that was like the main one. And when it came out, there was a stamp set as well with like the little cancellation marks and little, you know, denominations, etc., etc. So had that. And then there were 3 different stencil sets when it was released. There was like your standard stencil set, which is just the Postage Collage. So there's your just basic squares. It even had kind of the like postcard type stuff. And then there's like little patterns. So there was that stencil set. There was the everyday stencil set that's got different layers to fill in and to create different little scenes. And then there was the Christmas set, which I have done a video on. And then down the road, they came out with the fall set. So there was the fall, which I have upside down, but it's the Postage Collage fall little stamp set, and the same idea. Little cancellation marks, and then there's little bits and pieces for the coordinating stencil set. And same thing, done a video on this one. And then they came out with the Postage Collage rose set. So there was the stamp set, same thing, little cancellation marks and everything. And then there was the stencil set, which again, done a video on. So just lovely. So all of this, with the exception of the cancellation like stamps, all these different stencil sets coordinate with the original die set. So just as is. Now, the stamps will obviously go with anything because they're just little cancellation marks, etc. So now we've got several new sizes to just completely expand the whole concept, and I was so excited when I saw this. So we have the slimline size. So you got the slimline, and it's also got just a bunch of other little like postage wafer dies. There is a stencil that will also work with the wafer die. So we have slimline, there's mini slimline, and again, there's a stencil. There's A6, which I think is 4 by 6. I didn't even measure this one before we started. It is just over 4 inches by 6 inches. Yeah. Yeah. So for A6 size cards, which I don't think I've ever made an A6 size card, but I know there's, you know, many different card sizes out there. So we've got the A6 size and the stencil. And then finally we have the A7 size. So for 5x7 cards and the stencil. And that's actually the one I chose to use today because I was like, go big or go home. Let's use the biggest one. So, like I said, I'll have links to them along with everything else. And then if you keep watching, I will show you guys how I made the cards for today's video. So the first thing I did was just die cut some smooth white cardstock with that large A7 Postage Collage wafer die. And then to create my scene, my individual like postage stamps, I pulled out the Waffle Flower Spread Your Wings stamp set. I don't even remember when this came out. I've had it for a while. And it was perfect because I was like, oh, everything's kind of big enough to fit all of these and I can use them. And then the sentiment is from the Coffee Shop Talk set, which I think was part of like the same release. There was another set I was going to use that had little hamsters in it, but the butterflies won out. Anyway, I'll have links, like I said, to all the things in the description box below. But I kind of figured out my placement of the images and the sentiment. And then I'm going to stamp these onto this white cardstock. I've got everything in my MISTI. And I'm just going to stamp these onto the cardstock with Simon Says Stamps Intense Black ink. Because I do plan on doing just a little bit of copa coloring. But I'll get to that. So I die cut everything twice because, as always, why not? When I've got the time and I'm in the mood, I like to make more than one. So stamp that again onto the second die cut panel. And then for that large rectangle, I wanted to use the largest butterfly. And I just needed to do a tiny bit of masking so that I don't get ink past the body plus one of the little antennae I wanted to mask off. So tiny little bit of Post-it tape, that's all I needed. And then I can ink up the stamp with the ink, remove the Post-it tape, and then stamp that onto the cardstock and then repeat the process because my ink pad is very dry and I was going to re-ink it and I don't know. My re-inker grew legs and walked away. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happened to it. I'm so annoyed. I know I have one and I know the second I order it and once it arrives, I'll find the other one because isn't that how it always is? Anyway, repeated the process on the second panel. So masked it off, inked it up, stamped it, etc. So once I had everything inked up and stamped, I'm going to put both of these backgrounds onto my big Waffle Flower grip mats. Do you need more than one? Technically, no. I have been using these so much. You can see the one I got originally and how stained it is. But I got a second one because I was like, because usually I'm doing, more than one panel at a time. So for me, it's just a convenience factor. So I put the stencil over the panels and then I just did very simple ink blending. It's not even very even. It's going to smooth out as it dries. And I'm also not worried about going over any of the butterflies because everything I'm going to do is going to be tone on tone to make life easier. If I was going to do like the background, say like a green color, and then I wanted my butterflies to be pink, I would probably have masked off all of these butterflies so that the inks aren't overlapping because like green and pink will make sludge. So because I'm doing tone on tone, I'm not worried about it. I'm kind of avoiding the butterflies to a degree, but at the same time, I'm just not worried about it. So the inks I'm using are Concord and 9th inks, and I'm using Nectar for the backgrounds. And then to color the butterflies, I'm using the coordinating Spread Your Wings stencil, and I'm using the two darker shades. So that's Grapefruit and Sorbet ink. And for these, I'm using my Waffle Flower shader 1 plus brushes. That's the slightly larger one. And then for the tiny little detail spots, I'm using the shader 0 plus brush because I can get right in there. Like, I love these brushes. I have been using them in so many videos. They're perfection. So you could skip all of this and just color them, But I was like, ooh, I have the stencil. This is going to make things so quick and easy. And it did. This all came together so fast. So I just went around and filled in the butterflies with the medium shade, which was the grapefruit ink. And then I would add little bits of detail here and there with that 0 plus brush, so the tiny little brush and the sorbet ink. And just worked my way around and did this for all of these little butterflies. And of course, that big butterfly that I'd masked off, I did the exact same thing with the stencil. I just used a little bit of Post-it tape so I didn't get ink past that center portion of the butterfly, and then I was good to go. So one of my, worked my way around the first panel, moved on to the second one, did the exact same thing. And just kind of, didn't even really worry about like trying to blend the colors together because they're just going to do that sort of on their own anyway. Again, when you're working kind of tone on tone, it's just easier. And also these inks do smooth out, kind of blend together, soften and dry back. So I've kind of, the more I use these inks, same with Simon's Positively Saturated inks, they just kind of do their own thing. So I don't have to put in as much effort, which is also a win. So after I did the blending, I took one of the little solid butterfly images from the set and I stamped that onto one of the panels with the medium shade, which was the grapefruit. And then I also inked up one of the little flight trails and inked that up with the sorbet ink and stamped that next to the little butterfly. And then I also inked up the solid butterfly with that sorbet ink to stamp on that little blank panel so that it had something going on there. So got those stamped. And then at this point, I decided to pull out a couple Copic markers. Again, you could totally skip this, but it's just a nice way to add just that little extra something. The color's already there. The detail and dimension's already there. This just steps it up another little tiny bit. And again, this was pretty quick since I'm just kind of layering on top of the ink that's already there. So I just used 2 Copic markers and just filled in just little areas just to add that extra little oomph to these butterflies. So I used an R05 and an R02 Copic marker. And this is where it was kind of imperative that I had stamped the images with that intense black ink because it's alcohol marker friendly ink. So I don't have to worry about the ink smearing or being all weird. And then for these kind of little open butterflies, I just added detail with the darker Copic marker, just added a little dot detail to give, that little extra something. And then I had completely forgot that there was a little body for these butterflies. So I stuck that onto an acrylic block and I stamped that just with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, just quick and easy. So that kind of finished off those little butterflies. So just freehand stamped those into place. And then after I got all of those stamped, I'm going to start adding some of the other little elements. So I decided to add some little hearts that are part of the Postage collage set. There's just this little tiny cluster of hearts. So I stamped those with the Nectar ink, that same light shade. So these will dry back and be even kind of fainter than they're looking right now. But it's just kind of part of the background. And then I use the other stamps to fill in the denominations and the cancellation marks and all those things. And yeah, I don't know what it is. I just really enjoy doing these. It's ooh, I'm making my own little postage stamps. Honestly, if that could be a thing, I know it is in the States. There's tons and tons of people in the States that can create art and stuff for postage stamps. In Canada, it's a totally different thing. We do not get near the variety of postage, but we're also a 10th of the population. It's a totally different thing. But yeah, I love, we send cards. I love fun postage stamps, the more colorful and fun, the better. So this is kind of one way for me to get that. And it just works too with making cards. It just makes sense to me. So I just went along and stamped randomly the cancellations and the different things. I used VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink for all of those, as well as some of the sorbet ink just to kind of mix it up a bit and just all over. I don't know. To me, this is almost like splatter, but I'm also going to add splatter, of course. So went along until I was happy with them and then splatter because that's just what I like to do. So I put these into my splat box and I've got some black soot distress paint. Shake that up, put a little bit onto my palette, and then I'm going to splatter this with my little fan brush. And somewhat of a lighter hand than what I normally do. Because it's also black soot distress paint, which is super intense. There's no going back with this stuff. So I just kind of splattered it around, purposely avoiding the area where the main little, that fluttering by to say hi sentiment was, because I didn't want, you know, a bunch of splatter over that. I've shown in other videos though, if you're, you know, very concerned, to just cover it with a bit of, you know, copy paper or a little bit of Post-it tape, that sort of a thing, to protect the sentiment. Or even put the stamp itself, like after you've cleaned it off, you can set the stamp like on top of the panel before adding splatter. I don't do that when I'm using things like distress paint, because it does dry permanent and I don't want to have to fuss with cleaning that off, like the back of the stamp and whatever. But anyway, did my splatter. Like I said, distress paint dries permanent, so washed my brush, you know, cleaned everything off, and then let that splatter dry. And then I took some black baker's twine and just threaded that through the postage collage background. I don't know why, but that's another thing I love about it. You can also cut these apart. I did that in my first video using these that I'll have linked in the end screen. So you can cut them apart and, you know, and use them that way. So they're individual little elements, but I also just like leaving them like just one solid panel like this. I don't know. I really like that. So I had doubled up the baker's twine. I used my reverse tweezers to help me tie that in a bow. And then I decided it needed some sparkle, because why not? So I used my Nouveau Aqua Shimmer pen, which, side note, I just got the notification that this is finally back in stock. I have been waiting months, literal months. I just ordered another little set of these. They do last for like ever, but I like to use mine a lot. So I ordered a set for backup. Anyway. So I added that to, you know, different elements. I, you know, went over the stamped butterflies. I was being careful as I was painting it over, because these inks are somewhat water reactive, and the Aqua Shimmer pen will reactivate the inks, sort of a thing. But I found if I was just careful with when I was, you know, painting on the shimmer, it was just fine. And it looks like nothing right now. Like, it looks like I'm doing absolutely nothing. But wait till the end, because I'll show with my flashlight. It's super sparkly and amazing, and I love it. So after I did that, again, let it dry. And then my final little, you know, bits of embellishment was to just take my white gel pen. This is the Jelly Roll 10, so the widest white gel pen, my favorite. And went along and just added random little like highlights and dots and things. Again, just to give it that little... It just, you know, steps it up, just that little bit, you know, gives it that little extra something. So I went around and did that with all of the butterflies. And then for the insides of my cards, I just trimmed down a couple panels of white cardstock. I trimmed them down to like 4.5 by 6.5, I think. And I'd stamped another sentiment from that coffee shop talk set. And then I stamped one of the butterflies with black ink, and then used the stencils in the exact same way. So I just blended the grapefruit ink and then the sorbet ink with the tiny brush. So I used the 1+ brush for the grapefruit ink just to fill it in, and then used the tiny 0+ brush with the sorbet ink just to add that little bit of detail. And then stamped one of the trails with the sorbet ink, and then stamped a couple of the solid butterfly with the lighter shade. And then I'll stamp the little bodies as well. So these are going to go on the inside of my cards, because my cards are going to be 5 by 7 cards that I made from some peach cardstock from my stash. And the white panels just kind of give it that little extra something. And then to adhere the card fronts to the card bases, I put Big Mama foam tape on the back of these panels, just avoiding all those little open holes so that you don't see the adhesive through them. So I just put this on the back, so this will pop it up just a bit. It'll give it that little bit of dimension, plus it'll adhere it nicely because I have that baker's twine, you know, wound around it, and like it's a double thickness of that. So got all the foam tape in place. I'm going to adhere that panel I did onto the inside of the card with just some craft tacky glue, just like so. And then I'll peel off the backing and then adhere the card front to the card base, and that's going to finish it off. And then I'll turn on my flashlight and show you guys the sparkle, because it's fabulous. Because really, you guys know me. I'm a magpie. Like, show me something shiny, sparkly, and I am all over it. So there we go. See, it looks like nothing until the light hits it, and then it's like, oh, it's pretty. I love it. So those are my cards. Like I mentioned, I will have links to all the things in the description box below the video. If you just expand the description box, everything's going to be there, along with my link to my blog post, etc., etc. That will all be directly below. And then I'll have the other videos I mentioned and whatnot at the end screen, so you can check those out if you are interested as well. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.